The bathroom light cast a soft glow as I stood there, watching Alex fumble through his toiletry bag. It was just past 7 in the evening, and the small apartment we shared had fallen into that comfortable silence that comes when two people have grown accustomed to each other's presence. I'd known Alex for about 8 months now, ever since we both answered the same roommate ad and decided to split the rent on this modest 2-bedroom near downtown. He was everything I wasn't: outgoing, confident, with a certain ease about him that drew people in. I, on the other hand, preferred the quiet comfort of my sketchbooks and paints, often spending hours lost in creating worlds on canvas rather than navigating the real one. "Hey Jordan," Alex called out, his voice echoing slightly against the bathroom tiles. "You wouldn't happen to have a razor I could borrow, would you? Mine's completely dull, and I've got that networking event tonight." He looked up at me with those earnest brown eyes that somehow always managed to get what they wanted. I hesitated for a moment. There's something oddly personal about sharing grooming tools, isn't there? Like crossing some invisible boundary. But then again, we've been living together for months, sharing a refrigerator, a living room, even occasionally borrowing each other's clothes when laundry day got delayed. "Yeah, sure," I replied, reaching into the medicine cabinet for my razor. "It's fairly new. Just cleaned it yesterday." I handed it to him, our fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. Alex smiled, that charming half-grin that seemed to light up his entire face. "You're a lifesaver. This meeting could mean a huge account for the agency, and I can't show up looking like I just crawled out of the wilderness." He ran a hand along his jawline, where stubble had formed a shadow across his otherwise smooth skin. I leaned against the doorframe, not quite ready to leave. There was something fascinating about watching Alex prepare for these events. The transformation from my laid-back roommate to the polished professional who commanded attention in any room. "Big fish, huh?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "The biggest," he replied, wetting his face and applying shaving cream with practiced motions. "The kind that could fast-track my promotion." He raised the razor to his cheek and then suddenly stopped, a look of frustration crossing his features. "Damn it, I can't see properly. The lighting in here is terrible for this." I glanced at the single overhead light that had been there since we moved in. We'd talked about updating the fixtures, but never got around to it. "Yeah, sorry about that. We should really get that fixed." Alex turned to me, razor still in hand, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Hey, you're the artist here. You've got the steady hand and the eye for detail, right?" I felt my stomach tighten. "What are you suggesting? Help me out? Just hold the mirror or something so I can see better?" There was that smile again, the one that made saying no feel impossible. Before I knew it, I was perched on the edge of the bathtub, holding a small handheld mirror while Alex carefully navigated the razor across his skin. We were close, closer than we'd ever been, and I could smell his cologne, something woodsy and subtle that I'd noticed lingering in the apartment on days when he had important meetings. "So," Alex said, breaking the silence as he rinsed the razor, "how's that commission coming along? The one for the cafe downtown?" I was surprised he remembered. I'd mentioned it once, maybe twice, during one of our brief conversations in the kitchen. "It's challenging. The owner wants something that captures the essence of the place, but isn't too specific. Whatever that means." Alex chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "Sounds like typical client speak. Make it pop, and I'll know it when I see it," are phrases we hear all the time at the agency. Exactly. I found myself laughing along with him. It's like they expect you to read their minds. As Alex continued shaving, he shared stories about difficult clients and impossible deadlines, each tale punctuated with self-deprecating humor and insights that revealed more about him than I'd learned in months of living together. I found myself opening up too, talking about my struggles with finding my artistic voice, the constant battle between creating commercial work that paid the bills and the personal projects that fed my soul. "You know," Alex said thoughtfully, pausing with the razor, "I've seen your work. The pieces you have hanging in your room? They're incredible, Jordan. You have this way of capturing emotion that's, I don't know, it's raw, authentic. You shouldn't doubt yourself so much." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, and used to such direct praise. "Thanks. That means a lot." The conversation flowed easily after that, our voices soft in the small space, creating a bubble that felt separate from the rest of the world. I learned that Alex had originally wanted to be a photographer before falling into advertising. He told me about growing up in a small town where being different wasn't celebrated, about his first heartbreak in college, and how he'd spent years trying to prove himself to parents who wanted him to pursue a more practical career. In turn, I shared my own stories. My childhood spent drawing instead of playing sports, my first art show in a tiny gallery that only 3 people attended, and my ongoing struggle with believing my work was good enough. There was something about the intimacy of the moment that made honesty feel not just possible, but necessary. As Alex reached the tricky area under his jawline, he frowned in concentration. "This is always the hardest part," he muttered, tilting his head back. "Here, let me adjust the mirror," I offered, leaning in closer. "Actually," Alex said, lowering the razor, "would you mind would it be weird if I asked you to do this part? I always end up nicking myself here." My heart skipped a beat. "You want me to shave you?" He shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, but I could see a hint of vulnerability in his expression. "Only if you're comfortable with it. It's just, you're an artist. Steady hands and all that." I hesitated only briefly before taking the razor from him. "Okay, but if I cut you, remember this was your idea." Alex laughed, the sound sending a strange flutter through my chest. "I trust you," he said simply. Those 3 words hung in the air between us as I positioned myself in front of him. I'd never been this close to Alex before, close enough to see the different shades of brown in his eyes, to notice the faint freckles across the bridge of his nose that I'd somehow never seen before. "Tilt your head back a bit," I instructed, surprised by the steadiness in my voice despite the sudden racing of my pulse. Alex complied, exposing the vulnerable curve of his throat. I raised the razor, acutely aware of the trust he was placing in me. With careful, deliberate strokes, I began to remove the remaining stubble from under his jaw. The bathroom was silent except for the soft scrape of the razor and our breathing, which seemed to have synchronized without either of us noticing. "You're good at this," Alex murmured, his voice vibrating slightly beneath my fingertips. "I'm just careful," I replied, focusing intently on the task to avoid thinking about how intimate this moment had become. As I worked, Alex's eyes never left my face. I could feel his gaze, curious and intense, but I didn't dare meet it. Something was shifting between us, something I couldn't quite name but could definitely feel, like the air before a storm, charged and expectant. I was nearly finished when Alex suddenly reached up and placed his hand over mine, gently guiding the razor for the final stroke. Then, in a movement so natural it seemed choreographed, he took the razor from me and set it aside. Before I could step back, he placed his hand under my chin, tilting my face up slightly so our eyes finally met. "Thank you," he said softly, his thumb brushing lightly across my jawline. "For the help, and for listening." I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how close we were standing, of the warmth of his hand against my skin. "Anytime," I managed to reply, the word barely audible. For a moment, neither of us moved. The bathroom seemed to shrink around us, the air growing thicker with each passing second. I could see the question in Alex's eyes, could feel it in the slight pressure of his fingers still holding my chin. All it would take was the slightest movement forward. The sharp ring of Alex's phone shattered the moment. He blinked, as if waking from a dream, and reluctantly dropped his hand. "That's probably my reminder alarm," he said, his voice slightly rougher than usual. "I should finish getting ready." I stepped back, creating distance that suddenly felt necessary. "Right, of course. The networking event." Alex reached for the phone, silencing it without looking away from me. "Jordan, you should get going." I interrupted, not ready for whatever he was about to say. "You don't want to be late." He nodded slowly, a mix of emotions crossing his face too quickly for me to interpret. "We'll talk later? When I get back?" It wasn't really a question, but I answered anyway. "Sure. Later." I retreated to my room as Alex finished preparing, listening to the familiar sounds of him moving around the apartment, the opening and closing of his bedroom door, the jingle of keys being collected, the squeak of that one floorboard near the entrance. When the front door finally closed behind him, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. What had just happened? What was that moment in the bathroom? I paced my small bedroom, replaying every second, analyzing every word and touch. Had I imagined the tension, the connection? Was I projecting my own confused feelings onto an innocent interaction? Because the truth was, I had been noticing Alex differently lately. The way he hummed off-key while cooking breakfast. How his face lit up when talking about a project he was passionate about. The kindness he showed in small, everyday gestures, like remembering how I took my coffee or picking up my favorite snacks when he went grocery shopping. I'd been pushing these observations aside, filing them under roommate appreciation rather than examining them too closely. But tonight, in that small bathroom with the inadequate lighting, something had changed. Or perhaps it had simply become impossible to ignore. Hours later, I heard the front door open again. It was just past midnight, and I was still awake, pretending to work on sketches for the cafe commission, but really just waiting. I listened as Alex moved around the apartment, his footsteps eventually pausing outside my door. There was a moment of silence, and I imagined him standing there, debating whether to knock. My heart pounded as I stared at the door, willing it to open and simultaneously hoping it wouldn't. The soft knock, when it finally came, still startled me. "Jordan, you still up?" I took a deep breath, setting aside my sketchbook. "Yeah, come in." The door opened slowly, revealing Alex still dressed in his networking event attire, though his tie was loosened and the top button of his shirt undone. He looked tired but somehow energized, a curious combination that suited him. "How did it go?" I asked, gesturing for him to come in. He entered, closing the door behind him before sitting on the edge of my bed. "It went well, I think. Made some good connections." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "But honestly, I had a hard time focusing." I raised an eyebrow, trying for casual. "Oh, why's that?" Alex looked at me directly, all pretense gone. "You know why." The air between us grew heavy again, like in the bathroom, but this time there was no phone to interrupt, no deadline looming. Just us, and the question that had been left unanswered. "About earlier," Alex continued when I didn't respond. "I wanted to make sure I didn't make you uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention." I shook my head. "You didn't. It was nice, actually." A smile slowly spread across his face. "Nice." I felt my cheeks warm. "You know what I mean." "I'm not sure I do," he replied, his voice teasing but gentle. "Maybe you should explain it to me." I took a deep breath, gathering courage from some reserve I didn't know I possessed. "I like being close to you. I like talking with you, really talking, not just the surface-level stuff we usually stick to. And I liked when you touched me." The admission hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. Alex's expression softened, relief and something else, something warmer, filling his eyes. "I've wanted to do that for a long time," he confessed. "Touch you. Talk to you, really talk. But I wasn't sure if you felt the same way. I wasn't even sure if you were interested in men." I laughed softly, the tension breaking slightly. "I'm interested in people. Some more than others." I met his gaze meaningfully. "You more than most." Alex moved closer, slowly enough that I could have pulled away if I wanted to. I didn't. When he was beside me, he reached out, his fingers grazing my jawline just as they had in the bathroom. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. And then he was leaning in, and I was meeting him halfway, and our lips touched in a kiss that felt both surprising and inevitable. His hand moved to cup the back of my neck, drawing me closer as the kiss deepened. I found myself responding with an enthusiasm that might have embarrassed me if I'd had the capacity to feel anything beyond the sensation of Alex's mouth on mine, his fingers in my hair, his body warm and solid against me. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Alex rested his forehead against mine. "I've been wanting to do that since the third week you moved in," he admitted with a small laugh. "That long?" I asked, surprised and flattered. He nodded. "You were painting in the living room, completely lost in your work. You had this look of total concentration, and there was a smudge of blue paint on your cheek that you didn't even notice. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful person I'd ever seen." The words washed over me, filling spaces I hadn't realized were empty. "Why didn't you say anything?" Alex shrugged. "Roommate complications. Fear of rejection. The usual suspects." He traced a finger along my cheek, as if remembering that paint smudge. "What about you? When did you know?" I thought about it, trying to pinpoint the moment. I don't think there was one specific moment. It was more like a gradual realization. The way you remember to ask about my day. How you leave coffee for me in the morning, even though you're always up first. The fact that you actually look at my art and see what I'm trying to express. I paused, smiling slightly. Though I have to admit, watching you get ready tonight definitely accelerated things. Alex laughed, the sound warming me from the inside out. So all I needed to do was ask you to shave me? I could have saved us both months of pining. Apparently, I agreed, joining in his laughter. As our amusement faded, a comfortable silence settled between us. Alex's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining naturally. So what happens now? He asked, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. It was a good question. We were roommates, friends, and now potentially something more, a combination that could get complicated quickly. I don't know, I answered honestly. But I'd like to find out. If you would. Alex's smile was answer enough, but he spoke anyway. I'd like that too. Very much. That night marked the beginning of something new between us. Not just a relationship, but a deeper understanding. We agreed to take things slowly, mindful of our living situation and the friendship we both valued. But there was an undeniable shift in our dynamic, a new layer of connection that enhanced rather than complicated what we already had. In the weeks that followed, our apartment became a space of discovery. We learned each other's rhythms in new ways. How Alex liked to be the big spoon when we watched movies on the couch. How I preferred morning kisses to evening ones. The way we both gravitated toward each other's rooms at night, seeking conversation that often led to more. There were adjustments, of course. Learning to navigate the transition from roommates to partners came with its challenges. We had our first argument 3 weeks in, over something trivial that escalated because we were both still finding our footing in this new territory. But we also had our first reconciliation, which taught us more about communication and vulnerability than months of dating might have. And through it all, there was a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place that I hadn't even known were missing. Alex's confidence helped me believe more in my art, leading to the successful completion of the cafe commission and an offer for a small solo show. My attentiveness helped him slow down and appreciate moments he might otherwise have rushed through, bringing a balance to his often hectic life. 6 months after that evening in the bathroom, we found ourselves in a similar position. This time, though, it was me sitting on the edge of the bathtub while Alex carefully trimmed my hair, his movements precise and gentle. "Remember the first time we were this close?" he asked, his fingers combing through my hair. I smiled, leaning slightly into his touch. "How could I forget? You asked to borrow my razor and ended up stealing my heart instead." Alex laughed, setting down the scissors to place a kiss on the top of my head. "Best theft of my life," he murmured against my hair. As I tilted my head back to look up at him, I was struck by how far we'd come from that uncertain moment of connection. What had begun with a simple request, "Can I borrow your razor?" had evolved into something neither of us could have anticipated, but both of us needed. In the soft light of our bathroom, we'd finally upgraded the fixtures, with Alex's hands in my hair and his eyes meeting mine with that now familiar warmth. I felt a certainty I'd rarely experienced before. This was where I belonged. Not just in this apartment or this city, but here, with him, in this life we were building together. "I love you," I said, the words coming easily now after months of practice. Alex's smile, still as bright as ever, lit up his entire face. "I love you too," he replied, leaning down to seal the words with a kiss. And in that moment, I was grateful for dull razors and inadequate lighting, for borrowed grooming tools and nervous confessions, for all the small, seemingly insignificant moments that lead us to the people who change our lives in the most unexpected and beautiful ways. Because sometimes, the most profound connections begin with the simplest requests. Sometimes, all it takes is asking to borrow a razor, and having the courage to hold someone's chin while you finish the shave. Total _char_count, 18,621.